Welcome to the It's About Time podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me for a very special episode of the It's About Time podcast. I'm your host, Chief Learning Officer Reed Davis. And with this episode, we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to hit pause on the live recordings, and we're going to hit rewind on what has been a fantastic year of podcast guests, and we're going to bring you the best of the best from 2025. Enjoy. We understand that sales is the only revenue generating department in every community. But what benefit do you think that then gives to the prospect themselves or the resident themselves?
Well, I think that if the salesperson, right, isn't connecting with the prospect and they don't have the right tools and they don't know how to use those tools and the education and all the things that we need to be able to help families and seniors, it's the prospects, the families that we're working with, the seniors we're working with, they're the ones that lose, right? So it's not just about the company and profits and all of that, right? If you are in senior housing, you really want to help people, right? Or you would be selling cars, right? And probably making a little more money, right? So at the end of the day, if what we want to do is really help people and help seniors, we need to support our salespeople and give them everything we can so that they can do their jobs exceptionally well.
Probably 90% of the people that are on a website today are not sales ready. They don't want to engage with the sales conversation because they need to educate themselves a little bit. They don't know how to buy senior living. It's not something they've done multiple times in their life. And so, the adult children, primarily for needs-based senior living, they're the ones that are doing the initial, research. And they want to be left alone. They want to be anonymous and autonomous until they're ready to speak or engage with the sales team. And I think the big missed opportunity is the majority of people that we talk to are so focused on the move-ins in the next 30 days, the now and the urgent, that they are completely missing the opportunity to engage with those early stage, not sales ready leads and actually build a pipeline. But the pipeline of not ready leads today are your move-ins in 6, 9, and 12 months. And there has to be a lot more attention and intention of going out and getting those earlier stage leads and getting them to convert with you before they find the aggregator that's going to charge you thousands of dollars to probably buy back the lead that was on your website already. But because there was nothing for them to do except call or schedule a tour, and they weren't ready to do that, they're just going to bounce over to the competitor or to an aggregator. So you have to have a strategy to get people at all stages of their research and decision. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest opportunities in the industry today.
One of the things that I keep saying is, prospect-centered selling is a paradigm shift, right? And it's not just the paradigm shift that we're moving from like a product-centered approach to a prospect-centered approach. It's a paradigm shift in that you have a whole different set of tools. You have a whole different set. It's a different process, and there are different tactics and strategies. And really understanding that toolkit and what you have as to utilize. When there are cold leads and someone is in the denial stage, and actually knowing that there's something in that toolkit that's going to be able to help you move and change that, help that person on their journey. Like, that is what's really exciting to me, is communicating the fact that not just the paradigm shift and adopting that framework. It's actively adopting in your mindset that you have access to these tools constantly and making them just accessible in just this very online, user-friendly kind of way. That's what's really exciting to me.
We're selling the invitation to be a part of something, to shift your mindset into community life, to buy into community life as a prospect, right? It's kind of the same thing in that we're asking when we employ someone, we're inviting them to buy into our mission, our values, our methodologies, our systems, our culture. And so I thought, well, if what we're doing to nurture prospects towards that type of shift, it seems that it's the same psychological journey to invite a employee towards a psychological shift, to say, I'm all in, to push all their chips into the center and say, I want to be a part of this.
Think about what we're asking of our prospects. We are asking them to be unbelievably vulnerable, to leave homes that they have had for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, to leave a home that a spouse potentially passed away in or a child passed away in. And we're asking extreme vulnerability and trust. And so I have to give some hard truth sometimes to sales teams, because if you can't get vulnerable for 45 seconds, you can't ask that of your prospects. That's not fair at all. And so it's not about us. And if you're so adamant that you refuse to be on camera and build connection and trust with your prospects in this way, how do you expect them to uproot a life that they have built and trust that your community or you are the right guide for them?
I don't know what it is with human nature. I don't know if it's the, kind of the TikTok world that we're living in, where everybody wants something quick. We want information in short kind of snippets and little digestible bites. But it just seems like more and more people want less human contact, so to speak, or maybe at least in just kind of the inquiry process. How do you think a salesperson could translate, how your chat host communicates, so using such great emotion, into like an email or a text?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I wish I knew the golden ticket to that, but I think it is more about learning about your prospects as opposed to trying to sell to them. And so like what we do, we don't ask for information from them without earning their trust first. We don't ask for their phone number. We hardly ask for their name until a little bit further along, because that'll scare people off. So I would imagine it would translate the same way in email or, on the phone, or if you're texting with them too. Let's not ask them too many specific details about their name, their phone number, their email, their address, even though that stuff is really helpful, but maybe ask them more questions about their situation or what they like to do, or what does your mom enjoy doing? How are you feeling about it? It's all about listening and asking questions and earning that trust, because eventually when they are ready, that's going to be the person that they call, when they are ready to make that commitment and pick up the phone. It might be, who knows how long in the future, it could be years, but those will be the communications that I think people remember. And that's certainly how I am too. Even just looking at cars, I'm not going to call the millions of car dealerships that are harassing me after submitting one inquiry, but I'll call the one guy that was like, hey, come on over, test drive whenever you want. I don't need your license. I don't need your insurance. Just hop on over. I'm like, that's the guy I'll remember forever. And I will always get a car from him for that reason. It was low pressure and it was easy.
So when you start initially, and the first time you ever meet somebody is on a tour, I just feel like we're at a disadvantage. So I don't love starting with tours. That's all.
I absolutely love that. So where do you think, let's just take that scenario.
Yeah.
Where's the ideal place to start the sales process?
Wherever they are. If they call you on the phone, it's right there. That's your shot right there, that first phone call. Or if they do walk in your door, you have to make the most of the situation and capitalize on the time that you have with them. So ideally, I'd love to start on the phone and then in their home. Home visits first before tours, just to me make a much more successful process and a much more empowered prospect and a much more informed, empathetic leasing counselor, salesperson.
I absolutely love this. This is really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard another sales counselor say, I don't
tours.
like the tour. Normally they're like, yes, the tour. I can't believe I got it.
Yeah.
Totally let go of the result. Be curious. Find out who this person is. Ask a lot of open-ended questions. Don't judge. Tell them a story about yourself, a very personal one. You talk about a way of disarming. You got somebody that's colder than you can imagine. Tell them a story about yourself, something you've been through. It's incredibly effective.
Are you saying then by you letting your guard down or you expressing vulnerability that then almost unlocks this kind of emotion with them to say, you know what, if they did that, so can I?
The first thing they do is they start giving you advice.
Mm.
And that's great. At that point, it's the beginning of a relationship. You're becoming friends.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do. And by the way, to be a friend, you got to be tough too with them sometimes. You got to be honest and tough. You don't want them just to like you, but if they get mad at you, if you provoke them, I say evoke usually, but sometimes it's provoking, right? They go home. You want them to know that you're concerned about them and you're just being honest with them.
Everything is always sunshine and rainbows from a sales standpoint. When we think about how do we make a prospect feel before they make the decision to move in, or when we think about guiding that change conversation, if we take out the beautiful product and all of the service features, amenities, and benefits, how do we help somebody be able to understand and be able to speak to what's going on and what it is that's really truly holding them back from making the decision?
Part of it, Reed, is really honoring their ambivalence and seeing that there's a tension there for them, whether to stay or go, and helping them untangle that emotionally, what's really holding them back, and having them look at that, their own hesitancies, their own fears, their own misperceptions about what senior living is, and just I think the bottom line is the fear that they have.
As salespeople, when we look at ambivalence, right? And ambivalence, let's just say somebody that's maybe in the thinking stage. They're looking at whether or not to go. Why do salespeople rely so much on the go rather than why not stay home?
Well, I think it's a really paradoxical question to ask somebody. What would be the advantages for you, Mrs. Jones, to stay home? And having her answer that. And in a kind of a paradoxical way, honoring the fact that staying home's an option. Because our competition is not the guy down the street. The competition is home. Whether they're going to move when I look at it as whether they're going to move with us or whether they're going to stay in their home.
Yeah, when we look at penetration rates, I think only about maybe 8% of the people that ever reach out actually move anywhere, not just to senior living.
Right.
They don't move anywhere. And when we look at census information, what it says is that only about 5% of people over the age of 75 move in a given year, period. Not to senior living, just in general.
In general, yeah.
How do you inspire a salesperson or how do you motivate a salesperson to be able to lean into that ambivalence and almost take up the opposite side from what they're intrinsically trying to do, which is fill their community?
Well, I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier in part is giving up the outcome, that we just need to let go of that that our focus is on their process, not ours. It's on them, not our product. Like you said, our communities are generally beautiful, and the food is good, and the activities are good. But it really comes down to how we relate to them as people.
Trust, I mean, if you want to get into a complex topic for people, I think trust is the one to start with, because when we're talking about people that have lived decades, they've lived a lifetime, a true survivor of elements and interactions and just skunky, complex stuff. We have it as young people, we have it as adults, and imagine someone 95, what they got going on. So I love I love the people that were like, what do you know? What do you know? And I would be like, you're right. I mean, I don't know, actually. Like, validating sometimes their anger at you and their anger at this process is the best way to build trust, is to really say, like, you're absolutely right for what you feel. And that is so complex when people have maybe never even really trusted someone before. You know, I've heard stories from my mom that I'm like, wow, like, people have these deeply protected, terrifying truths about themselves. And for imagining like a salesperson is the one that they want to, because we're not just that, we're there in the moment with them to receive whatever their reality is. And it's up to them to really say, I'm going to trust you and give you that. But when they do, it's like, it's the most valuable interaction. It's the real sales interaction of the whole thing. It's such an honor that's what I think makes the job so rewarding, is that trust that they show you, and you've worked long enough to know what it means to them and how valuable it is for them and you. It's the best. It's one of the best things ever.
When you talk about PCS, or prospect case study, for those of you out there that don't know, or planning session, however you want to refer to it as, when you think about that and you think about the ability to slow down and let go of the outcome, did that mean that for every phone call that you guys made, did you really have like a detailed kind of plan for that phone call, or plan to advance? So it wasn't just calling to follow up, but it was really intentional and purposeful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was to a level of detail where we would, it wasn't a script, because I don't think a script is ever a good thing, because it sounds manufactured. But we would very much have, okay, what is the goal of this phone call? What do we want out of this? How are we going to help this individual? And what is our next step from that? And then we used to work backwards from that, I suppose. So we would plan the introduction and then the key questions that we would have within that. Okay, what do we need to find out within that phone call or that interaction, or what were the themes that we need to identify or address within that phone call? And as a result of going into that sort of level of detailed planning, we found that at the very least, our response rate was going up and up and up. But actually, we were starting to build that trust with our prospects, because our questions were all around that. It wasn't about talking about Birch Grove or, how wonderful we are, which we are, of course. But it was all about that. And we then started to see the results of going to that level of detail in terms of the planning. And because you start to see the results, you question them to start with, because you're like, is this going to work? But then we started to see the results. We started to see tours go up. And we thought, okay, this is working. This is working. We started to really celebrate the small wins. If we got a home visit that we teed up from the phone conversation to get a home visit, we celebrated that like it was almost like a reservation. And I think just as we went on, it really sort of started to build, and being that detailed, it really sort of helped us to then help our prospects.
When we looked at, we did a year-long study where we looked at what is the amount of time, it's something that's extremely important with prospect-centered selling, is being able to measure where are you spending your time, how much time are you spending in the selling zone. And when we looked at it, our salespeople were spending an average of 80 hours a year just spinning their tires with these leads that weren't really going anywhere. And my thought was, as a sales leader, is, what if we took that 80 hours and instead of constantly following up with people that maybe weren't qualified or we had no idea because we could never get a hold of them despite our best efforts, what if we put that 80 hours into people that were actually actively engaged in the sales process? So if I could give time back to my sales directors, what we found was that it actually increased conversion ratios at the community level, because they were actually they were engaging with people that were actively engaged in the sales process.
Tristan, you should give that example, because we've heard anecdotally, we're kind of moving toward more technology connection with owner operators, but anecdotally that our leads are better. And the reason they're better is they're looking for you or the community. They're finding the community and they're reaching out. So they are just about as active. Nobody's going to come to Where You Live Matters or any site if they're not really interested in looking, and they're not going to reach out to a community if they're not. That's very different than the aggregator model, where yes, they're looking for it. They don't know that so many times that they're on an aggregator or connected with an aggregator. And then those leads are pushed to communities that many times they've never heard of. So just that fact, they have looked, they've done their research, they've found an area, they've picked a couple from, an ungated map, and they've done the work. And so that they are motivated to talk. And so that's a very different, and for us, we're concerned, a very different audience.
I'd say maybe as an industry, and I would just say maybe if I could kind of broaden that out, that salespeople are so tied to the result.
They are tied to the result. They should be. But then what result? When I sold a product, the simple fact was if the product didn't go into a customer's hand, there was no result. For us in this industry, there's a lot of results. There's the result of coming back for the second tour. There's a result of meeting a resident. There's a result of experiencing an event. I think the hard part for us as leaders is to realize that those are valuable results. And it's not just the move in, because the knee-jerk reaction in operators that are struggling a lot of times is move in, completely ignoring all the other things that are actual good results and making, again, to your earlier point, everybody feel this pressure. Well, there was no move and I wasn't successful today. Hey, look, if I have a salesperson that makes 15 phone calls and gets 10 people to show up for the casino night that are prospects, and those 10 people meet 15 people in the building and learn about what a great time this is and the socialization and the food and the entertainment, that's a huge result. I mean, I should celebrate that because it will lead to the move-in. The move-in is just the result of a lot of hard work, but that's not the natural way we talk about sales. The move-in is where the revenue happens. And so unfortunately, that's what we often think is the result, but it's not.
What would you say are some of the challenges to a really robust resident ambassador program?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is just getting started. Start it off and let it evolve. It'll take on a life of its own. And so I think that's the biggest hurdle, is just get it going. But get it going with a purpose and with some level of structure, because the residents are going to look for guidance. And so again, you don't have to have all the answers initially, but come up with an answer and come up with a structure so you're not wasting their time and they're getting the most out of your time and what you're looking for, because you'll find that they're really willing to do a lot of things and almost anything for you, answer any type of questions, participate in almost anything you want, give you feedback on almost anything you want, but you just have to ask, and you have to set it up in a way where it welcomes that type of open discussion and participation. So I think the first challenge is just getting started. making sure you provide them with some type of structure, having a really, kind of a focused agenda for each one of the meetings. And if there isn't a good agenda for that month, maybe you don't need to meet that month, so save their time and be cognizant of that. Because when they come to the meeting, they want to understand how they can help. So you want to give them guidance on how they can help. If it's an upcoming prospect event, you want their feedback on and helping plan, which our resident ambassadors do, and it's amazing. They've given us great ideas for planning events. But again, you have to have that structure in front of them and make that ask so they know what's expected.
One of the things that I've always heard salespeople say is I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time, whether it's it takes too long to put stuff in the CRM, or maybe figuring out the part of the story that I don't know takes too much time. As a sales leader and as a former salesperson yourself, what advice would you give to somebody to be able to help them? You can't create more time, right? There's only 24 hours in a day. There's absolutely nothing you can do about that. What advice would you give to somebody to be able to help them better use their time so that they can create more time in the selling zone?
For me, I'm a big person on time management, and something that I recognized a few years back is the best time of day for me is the mornings. I think when somebody asked me that question of like, when are you most productive, or when is your brain most alive? I had to think about it. It wasn't something that became natural, like, wow, I'm really smart in the mornings. I just was on autopilot. But once you have that self-awareness, which I do believe is a superpower, that self-awareness of knowing, after 3 p.m., I'm a different person. Those are my hours that I'm going to focus more on data entry, on things that don't require as much brain juice. And I'm going to be very, regimented in terms of how I track my time. So I know if I'm going to be most efficient, most productive, most creative in the mornings, I may want to try as best as possible to set aside my time for tours, for planning sessions, for creative follow-ups based on what I know about myself. I think time is always going to be fluid and you have to be adjustable, but when you can tap into yourself and your greatest strengths and skills, then you can start shaping your time around your best attributes. And then also bringing in your team to help support you on days when time is just a challenge. How are you building a culture where sales is everyone's business and everybody understands and helps protect that time in the selling zone?
How do you operationalize that sales culture so that everybody buys in, whether or not they get a bonus when somebody moves in or not?
I think it starts at the actual top of the organization. I think it has to trickle down from the leaders through the community team, so that if EDs know that their boss and the leaders of the organization are bought into this, they will be more bought in as well. I think that's first and foremost. But I think it's spending time and helping the EDs understand what prospect center selling does to your bottom line, because they're ultimately concerned about NOI, right? So how does committing yourself to this methodology help your NOI, and get their buy-in that way? And then they will start talking about the methodology and the parts of the methodology every day in the community. It becomes like a language that everyone speaks together. And then you celebrate it. You involve team members and you make it a big deal. You celebrate them. I know it sounds simple, but I think having a housekeeper be a participant on a tour, and they do a great job. What are you going to do to make them feel special for being a part of it? And because then they're going to want to be a part of it more. They're going to do it. They're going to want to do it more. So I think it's really through the executive director. You have to have an ED that is 100% sold and committed to prospect-centered selling and the parts of the methodology. Planning sessions, home visits, creative follow-ups, so that when she's talking to other directors, she's using those terms to make sure that they understand the importance of them as well.
I've been through a lot of meetings where we're talking about just leads tours, repeat of tours, and sale. That was, that's been the traditional model, and it hasn't changed. That ask fundamentally until you start to really dive in and educate. And you have to have people who want to be educated about it. So it's finding the right fit of people who want to not just do good business, but keep optimizing and learning and being self-learners. And I think being a self-learner is a big part of what prospect-centered selling does for our teams. It's something we keep investing in them to learn.
So when you think about we'll first talk about managing up. And what I mean by managing up is, educating. You just talked about kind of educating the investor level, because I think a lot of times what they're so focused on is the numbers. And to them, rightfully so, right? Yeah. I mean, they have to be. This is a for-profit company. Experience is a for-profit company. And so you have to be able to turn a profit, and you have to be good stewards of their money. So when you think about, if you could just give me maybe what are one or two key ways that if another vice president or a regional sales director was watching this, how can you manage up to help them understand what is important in the sales process? Because all they're looking at a lot of the times is how many new leads, right? How well is marketing working? How are we converting? And then how many of those people are we moving in? And that's really kind of the three things that they look at. But how do you manage up as far as what the sales process looks like?
You know what I think every investor I've ever met measures as a high value? Time. So the fact that we're measuring time and the qualitative part of time is something that speaks to the audience. We're trying to educate about that. So measuring how you're spending your time and making sure that we actually have data and the analytics behind how that impacts those outcomes. That's how you can open a conversation about it, is measuring what matters and then speaking to that, because it is about time and we're all limited on that one resource. So really being prepared for that time that you're going to spend with clients and you're going to spend with each of the audiences that we're speaking to, I think is a way to start to bridge that.
Every prospect that we're able to impact, because the selling counselor and the leasing person does a better job, will have infinite value to that prospect and their family, especially if they can help them move before there's a crisis.
Imagine if we could just help each community move in 1 to 2 more people.
Each one that we do help is miraculous.
Thank you for joining us this week on the It's About Time podcast. That's a wrap for 2025. We're excited to bring you all new guests, some very special topics, and some really exciting podcasts in 2026.